All right, hey everyone, this is Mr. Miles. Going to do some quick review of subject-verb agreement. Okay, so this is something that I feel like we need to kind of just spend a little bit more time reviewing, making sure that we understand what's going on with it. Because really, once you understand the rules, it's not that complicated. But I think a lot of times the trap that we fall into is we fall into this trap of, well, it's not the way I would say it in conversation, right? So it makes our brains kind of short circuit, right? Because in conversation we would say something one way, and then you come to find out that this is actually not the grammatical way to say it. So you have to kind of unplug that part of your brain that tells you, well, that's not the right way I would say it. Well, just because it doesn't sound right, okay, um, doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong, or just because it does sound right or the way that you would say it in conversation doesn't mean that it is actually correct. It's similar to like with commas. Some people have been taught by teachers who don't know the rules of commas that, oh well, you just use a comma wherever there's a natural pause, right? That's not true, right? That's not how you actually use commas. There's actually rules governing when you use them. And once you understand the rules, it makes more sense why we use commas in certain places versus others. And so there are rules to the English language, there are rules to grammar, and so it's just a matter of figuring what those are, and applying them. Okay, so right here are your notes for subject-verb agreement. Okay, so subject-verb agreement is kind of the foundation upon which we are going to build the next couple grammar standards. Okay, so the first thing that we need to know about this is that subjects and verbs must agree in number. Okay, number, by that I mean singular versus plural, one versus multiple. That's all that means. So singular subjects take singular verbs, plural subjects take plural verbs. So what that winds up looking like is, if you have a singular subject like the dog, okay, then it takes a singular verb, and singular verbs have an S at the end of it. Okay, so the dog runs, right? Okay, the plural subject takes a plural verb, so obviously a plural subject usually has an S at the end. The dogs, and the plural form of the verb does not have an S. The dogs run. Okay, so if you notice, it's where the S comes that helps you kind of differentiate when one is singular versus one is plural. When the subject is singular, the S comes at the end of the verb. However, when the subject is plural, you just take that S and you move it to the subject. And obviously, you take away the S from the verb, and so it is a verb without an S in that instance. So that's what differentiates singular verb versus plural verb, and singular subject versus plural subject. Okay. Um, Indefinite pronouns are tricky because people look at them and they think about the word and not how the word is being used. Because if you look at how the word was being used and you look at the rules behind it that govern these words, then you would never make this mistake. Okay, so if you look at, some of these are common sense, right? Each one of the students turned in his test, right? It doesn't matter that I said students, plural, because I said each. That means each person is turning in his or her individual test. Either Jim or Bob will, well, it's one or the other. It's not both Jim and Bob, or else I would have said that. Okay, either and neither. Okay, again, one or the other. And I think, yeah, all right. Now, every other one of these, okay, anybody, anyone, anything, everyone, everybody, everything, no one, nobody, nothing, and somebody, someone, something, they're all singular. They're always singular. And what people mess up on is they think that because how they would normally say a sentence in conversation sounds good to them, they think that's the grammatical rule, which is not the case. So, like in conversation, you or I might say, somebody misplaced their hat, right? You might say that in conversation and not think twice because it sounds normal and natural in the way that we always say things. It's not the grammatical rule, though, right? The grammatical rule is somebody misplaced his or her hat. Because if it ends with one body or thing, it's always going to be singular. So somebody, someone, something, anybody, anyone, anything, everybody, everyone, everything, those are always going to be singular. So somebody misplaced his or her hat. Now, maybe his or her, it's really tricky to say that over and over again. So maybe we don't say that. Maybe we say somebody, her hat. Okay. I mean, if it looks like a female hat, maybe you would just say her hat, right? Like, a lot of this depends on the context of the situation that you're in. So, like, if you're on a football field, right? Somebody misplaced his helmet. I think it's a logical conclusion that it would be a male football player. So somebody misplaced his helmet, but it has to be singular. That's the issue we keep running into. Okay, so just make sure that you roll with that. Okay. Um, so those are, what do you do with that situation? Anyone is our okay. So would it be anyone is an option, anyone are an option, or anyone is a candidate for the job, or anyone are a candidate for the job? Well, it's anyone is, okay, because anyone is always singular. So know these, all right, know these, always singular. These pronouns are always plural, and these are common sense because, I mean, obviously both will always be plural because I'm at least always talking about two people. Few, I'm at least always talking about more than one person. Many, more than one. Several, more than one. So those are always going to be plural no matter what. Um, the ones that are tricky, if you think you've got the singular ones and the ones that are plural down, the ones that are going to mess you up are these. Okay, these six. Know these six words. Okay, all, any, more, most, none, some. These six pronouns can either be singular or plural depending on what comes after them. Okay, so example, most of the test multiple choice. Would that be is or would that be are? Well, I look not at this pronoun because all this pronoun tells me is that it could be singular, could be plural, depending on what comes in the prepositional phrase after it. So I look at the prepositional phrase, most of the blank. Okay. Well, in this case, it's most of the test. Okay. Most of the test is singular, so it should be is. Okay. Now, but what if I said most of the questions? Well, now I've switched it. It's questions, plural. So most of the questions are multiple choice. So those six go either way depending on what follows after them. Okay. Those are the six you have to absolutely know because they will mess you up if you only look at the pronoun because the pronoun might imply, oh, well, it's always going to be plural. Not always. You have to look at what comes after it. Okay. So that's one thing to definitely make note of. Okay. So for example, several of those colors. Okay. Well, that doesn't work because, or I don't have to worry about colors because several already tells me it's going to be plural. Some of the story, singular, is funny. Most of the food, singular, tastes. Okay. And then like one. one is it's one of those where, yes, I see paintings, but I don't care about that because the pronoun one is going to be singular, right? Makes sense. One should be singular. Um, so that's the indefinite pronouns. That's what trips a lot of people up. Okay. So compound subjects. Compound subjects are basically self-explanatory. You have more than one subject. Okay. So what if I have the shark and the sticky notes? Okay. Well, if I have the shark and the sticky notes, I'm talking about both of them. So that means it must be plural. Okay. What if I'm talking about the shark or the sticky notes? Okay. Well, or I guess shark, sticky notes, pad. All right. Let's just keep it singular for now. Let's keep it the same thing. So it's either the shark or the sticky note pad. So if it's one or the other and they're both singular, then it's going to be singular. Okay. If I had more than one of these sharks and I said it's either the sharks or the sticky notes, then it would be plural, obviously, because either way, one of them is plural. Okay. If I've got two plural subjects joined by or. If it's the shark or the sticky notes, one is singular, one is plural. The shark or the sticky notes, which one do I go with? Well, you go with the one that is closest to the verb. So if I said the shark or the sticky notes blank on my desk, okay, then I would go with sticky notes because sticky notes is closest to the verb. So I say the shark or the sticky notes are on my desk. But if I swapped it and I said the sticky notes or the shark, it now becomes is on my desk because the shark is closest to the verb. All right. So that's how you deal with the compound subjects. All right. There are exceptions like chicken and dumplings, red beans and rice. Yes, those are joined by and, but they're referring to one dish, one thing. Or if you have a guy who has multiple titles um, or multiple job titles, so like he is my boss and the principal, well, it's the same guy. He's Dr. Huff. He's one person. So those are the only exceptions really to this rule. But to recap, whenever you have subjects joined by and, it's a plural verb, okay, unless it's referring to one thing, okay. Subjects joined by or nor that are singular take singular verb. Plural joined by or nor take a plural verb, okay. Like these examples here, pen or pencil is needed. The Bulldogs or the Mustangs are winning this game because both are plural. And then if it's one singular, one plural joined by or nor, then you go with the one closest to the verb. Okay. So that's really it for subject verb agreement. There's a lot more kind of nitpicky stuff that we'll have to get into when we do pronoun antecedent agreement next week. But for the subject verb agreement, the biggest thing that you'll probably get the most bang for your buck studying are these indefinite pronouns, especially the ones that go either way depending on what comes after them. You need to know what those 6 pronouns are because if you don't, you will mess up. Okay. Because you will just look at that word and you'll say, most. Well, most, that sounds like a bunch of things. So that's obviously going to be plural. No, not always. It just depends on what comes after them. Most of the computers, it would be plural. Most of the technology, would be singular. So you just need to understand how it's being framed in the sentence to use it correctly. And then know these that are always plural. A lot of these, like I said, are common sense. And then know these that are always singular. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, shoot me a remind, something like that, and I'll be happy to kind of explain anything in more detail to you. But that's just hopefully a nice little explainer about how these things work and understanding that when it comes to this, it's about following the rules of grammar, not about following what sounds right to our ear, because oftentimes our ears can deceive us because what we say organically and naturally in conversation might sound fine in conversation, informal conversation. It may not be grammatically correct. And that's just the thing that we have to understand about the English language is that there is a formal English and there is a standard English. There is informal, which is what we talk, which is chatting, hanging out. And then there is standard English, which is following the rules, okay? Not just the way people talk, but how we were supposed to talk, okay? So kind of decoupling ourselves from that kind of frame of mind of, well, it sounds right, it must be right, is kind of key to understanding and doing well on this topic, okay? So if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be happy to explain anything more that you think you need. But just know these rules, especially these indefinite pronouns here. These are really where you're going to be tested on the test, all right? So if you have any questions, let me know. We'll see you Monday.